Lion Runner 777 at reviews and revisits on both YouTube and Instagram. We're going to get into this video essay of A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan story.
He dropped in on us out of nowhere and he played us a song. In that moment, we got a feeling we were getting a glimpse of the future.
This film takes a grounded and close up look at Dylan's early career from when he first came to New York in 1961 and carries us through to 1965, about the time he kind of transitioned from being a folk music hero to more of a rhythmic rock singer, alienating his folk music purist crowd to a large degree, but yet still growing in his iconography with iconicism, I guess, amongst the populace at large. And I like how the film kind of hones in on this time period and doesn't try to make it a movie about his whole life and doing this epic backstory and all those sorts of things that would have made it more of a montage or a collage of a bunch of scenes smashed and rushed together like a lot of biopics do, but instead really focused in and honed in on Dylan as a person, his career transition, and some of the loves of his life, not only with Joan Baez, but also it looks at the relationship that he had with, I have to look at her name again. In the movie, they use the name, I think, Susan Rotolo, but in real life, she was an artist who went by the name of, and I can't find it now that I need it. She went by the name of, a real life name is Susan or Suze Rotolo. That's the real name. I'm sorry. And Sylvie Russo is the name used in the movie. So that's the difference. And I like to look at that relationship, kind of how it developed. I like how they took the time to show it develop and how they showed them kind of drifting apart and how he Dylan seemed to be kind of even a recluse within his personal life. Like he really didn't let people get to know him very well, at least early on, uh, particularly with Sylvie Russo. As far as the film portrays it, she really wasn't sure of his background. Not only do we not really know his background that well, and it's kind of a mystery. He seems to have been a mystery to her and people in his personal life. Like he was kind of playing games with whether or not he was really ever in the circus and where he came from exactly and what he was doing before he arrived in New York. Uh, Even though I've seen interviews where he seems to talk like the 60 Minutes interview he did in 2004 with Ed Bradley. He talks about being from Minnesota and his parents, and he talks about hanging out in record stores and how he had a vision of becoming a musician and all that kind of stuff, and believing that he would become one when he was a teenager, from hanging out in record stores and listening to music and wanting to see what was out there in the world, beside what was in the small world of his Minnesota hometown. I also learned that his name is actually Robert Zimmerman, and he just picked the name Dylan. Of course, a lot of people named Robert go by the name Bob. The movie is very engaging through and through, though it does drag at a certain point in the movie. And I'm going to kind of read a little bit from the written review that I did for my reviews underscore and underscore revisits uh, Instagram page where I do written reviews there, and kind of point out a couple more things here. But before we do that, please take a moment to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to be notified of more of my videos as they are uploaded. Thanks a lot. So as you can see here on reviews underscore and underscore revisits at Instagram, I kind of titled this review, or kind of my caption topic at the top is a movie that really envelops you in the world of Dylan's day and time, making it definitely worth the watch. And that I can definitely back that up again to say that it's definitely worth the watch because it does really draw you in. You really feel like you're in that time. I understand that they went and shot a lot of the movie. They actually took a lot of it out to New Jersey, a particular city that had more of the look of what New York used to look like in Greenwich Village in the 60s, and it still kind of had that look more so as far as on the street level. so that they could maintain the authenticity, and how they redesigned Dylan's apartment, his New York apartment, how they used reference pictures from his actual apartment. And Timothy Chalamet was talking about how down to like the coffee stains were exact. So you really did feel like you were there with Dylan in his actual world of that time. So I thought they did real well there. In this first paragraph, I kind of talked about what I kind of spoke to in the earlier part of this audio review. But then here I note um, well, like I was saying, how they didn't do a flashback for the biop, kind of in the way that did work for the Bob Marley movie and his biopic that came out last year. I felt like that would have been a distraction in this particular film, and I thought it helped with the whole um, issue, or the whole theme of Bob being mysterious, even to people who knew him, that he really didn't make himself understood and known as far as his background and so forth, or letting people really get inside of who he was too much. Where that worked in the Marley movie, I didn't think that would have been appropriate here. But I state what Marley did have that this movie could have used was more of a central plot. We're just left watching Dylan's career progression with no particular pursuits or even conflicts till near the end. And that's a bit true. There's a middle part of the movie where it kind of drags a little bit, and you just don't really know where it's going. It's still interesting the whole time, like the way they really crafted the scenes, and the way the movie kind of moves, and the camera shots keep you involved in what's happening with him. But then you start to just kind of wonder, where are we going with this? We don't really have a setup conflict that's happening. It's just kind of the progression of Dylan, kind of his own internal transition. But even then, because I think Dylan in real life hasn't spoken to it a whole lot, the movie doesn't speak to really why. There's a couple of glimpses in things that he says later that give you a little bit of insight to his change, his progression out of the purest folk type style into more of a rock folk style. But it's kind of one point he says they'd have me singing "Gone with the Wind" for my whole GD life, with the little frustration and tension in his voice and on his face when Charlemagne says that as Dylan. And I kind of think it was kind of a thing where he wanted to progress or change, evolve in his music, and wanted to keep things interesting for himself. And he felt like people wanted him to stay where he was, but you can understand if people love musical style, they want that musical style kind of. They want to experience that again from an artist. I can speak to an artist of my time who I came up on in a whole different genre, Nas, who's considered one of the purest and greatest hip hop lyricists of all time. And he has a verse where he says, uh, they wanted me to make another Illmatic, but it's always forward I'm moving, never backwards. Stupid. Here's another classic. Kind of speaking to the same thing. His first album, Illmatic, was such a classic. It's still maybe considered the greatest lyrical album possibly of all time. And he was kind of speaking to that. It was like on his fourth album, Stillmatic. I think it was his fourth album. He was basically saying people wanted me to still remake the same thing that I did before, and I'm moving forward. I'm not going backwards. And so I continued here, even despite the conflict not really coming in till near the end. It's almost like watching a dramatized documentary for a stretch. Which, again, it's true, but it's still engaging. So that really doesn't. It's not a. I don't state that to dissuade you from watching it at all. It's definitely still worth the watch. You really do get kind of like an intimate portrait of who he was, and just kind of really getting the human experience of kind of being there in that space and time. Yet the movie is continuously engaging. Charlemagne really embodies Dylan, and you get a strong sense for Dylan's purview and others' purview of him from those who interacted with him personally. The writing, close up shooting, and letting the film breathe for personal touch bring you right into the movie. The movie never lagged much. I enjoyed watching it for all 2 hours with a satisfying conclusion. It does come to a head where he and the kind of the people from the folk music community, the kind of the gatekeepers of that, really wanting him to stay as the pure folk singer, and he has other plans, and that comes to head in a certain way. They kind of show the end of his well, his kind of butting heads in relationships. I guess I won't say more than that because if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend that you see it. So take the time to check it out. It's a really good film, well done, a good comeback for James Mangold after that rancid looking um, Indiana Jones movie that he did last summer for Disney, which I didn't even want to see because just just what you could get clearly from the previews, you could tell what that was going to be about. It wasn't going to be anything good, and the reviews weren't good. It ended up being one of the biggest bombs in movie history as far as total money lost. It may be the biggest total money loser ever, and so that's what that was. This was a good turnaround, probably more something more suited for Mangold, as he did Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash movie with Joaquin Phoenix back, I think, in 2004. This fits right in, and they have Johnny Cash is in this movie, a acted version of him because obviously, not obviously, but apparently Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan were friends. That Johnny Cash wrote him early on in his career when he first started making noise, and they kind of had a letter writing thing going, and then they ended up becoming in person friends and all that, which would make sense. That kind of fits, both singer songwriters, guitar players, kind of down home music styles that they both brought. You could see how they would have appreciation for each other, if nothing else. So, yeah, I appreciated this film, so this was a good one to check out. It's I think it really gets into the human experience. It wasn't a collage of everything thrown together to try to show a person's whole life. They really honed in on those 4 years, 4 or 5 years from like 61 to 65, and that was a good way to go. It really allowed you to get a tope on who Dylan was and how he kind of evolved in the early years of his career, which is probably the most interesting part anyway. So check it out if you will. I'm Lion Runner with reviews and revisits, again on both YouTube and on Instagram. Definitely hit me with that like, subscribe, and notification bell. I'm out.